Today, we become legends.
Today's Titan Talk went over the full OB18 balance patch notes, as well as a few additional features of OB18 that weren't discussed on the patch show last week, and some Q&A about Rod of Tahuti, new aspects, and more. So without further ado, let's jump in. So first up, Pon mentioned some Tsukuyomi int scaling nerfs based on feedback that he's a little too strong on the PTS, who would have guessed? The Mangetsu ranged attacks have been nerfed from 75% int to 65, and the Kusarigama bonus damage on the final swing if you have more int than strength has been nerfed from 30% to 20%. Next up, there's some new Halloween name colors coming in the update tomorrow that weren't ready to show off last time, but Kilgun went in-game to show them today. There's a pack of 8 base colors and a pack of 8 animated colors. As usual with the supporter store stuff, this will be pretty expensive, and it's generally expected that you only buy these if you want to support the game and flex. Before we get into the balance changes for OB18, just a quick heads up that I will be streaming some ranked as this video goes live on both Twitch and YouTube if you want to come and say hi. We're getting close to Demigod at this point and would love to have you around for it, but back to the video. So moving into the OB18 God balance, first up we have an Ares fix that's effectively a nerf. His ultimate is supposed to silence you while you're being pulled, but this silence was going off first and cancelling displacement immunity, which will then let you pull displacement immune gods, which he shouldn't be able to. So that's been fixed. Awilix is getting some buffs which are mostly reverts to previous nerfs from when she was really strong a long time ago. Her initiative, bonus strength, and basic attack power is being increased from 25% to 30, and her feather step damage multiplier from her attack chain is going from 1, 1.2, 1.8 up to 1, 1.35, 1.9. Bologna's 3 is getting a fix, so it will now work with Heartwood Charm. Hecate is getting a shift to make her 2 a bit more consistent in its damage. They're increasing the base damage and scaling, but decreasing the additional damage per stack, so it will hit harder at lower stacks but weaker at higher stacks. Giannis is getting some buffs with the mana cost of his 2 and 3 going down at all ranks, and his ultimate getting 10% more base scaling and 10% more max range scaling, as well as being fixed where int boosting items, most importantly Rod of Tahuti, were not affecting this ability's damage, so they now will. Jormungandr is getting a suite of buffs in this update as he has generally been underperforming across the board since his release. His +1 where you build up poison and then detonate it is getting a longer duration, more max health scaling, and more strength scaling. His 1 got a range increase in a hotfix recently for Smite 1 parity, but that's noted here as well. They also increased the knockup height of his 3 in both regular and aspect Yorm. And they fixed his ultimate on restricted camera pitch where it wouldn't let you target as far as you should be able to. Next up, we have some substantial Mulan changes to her +1 banner that she got coming into Smite 2. It's not an entirely new +1 like some people would like to see, but there are some substantial changes here to make it more useful, and I think it's probably going to be pretty strong. First off, the cooldown is being halved from 180 seconds to 90. The radius of the area is being doubled, which, as we all know from high school math, means the total area of the flag is way more than doubled. The movement speed when moving towards the flag has been doubled as well, from 5% to 10%, and finally they have removed the XP bonus mechanic and replaced it with a new effect that grants her training arc passive at all times. This is the 2-second cooldown refund, so essentially all of her cooldowns are a flat 2 seconds less while in the flag area, which is pretty massive, not just for overall damage and clear speed, but also for training her abilities faster. Not just this though, Mulan's ult is also getting a buff with her protections while firing the ability going from +30% to +40%, and the base damage of the arrow shot is going up substantially, especially in the later ranks. At max rank, this goes from 375 to 540. Moving on though, Susanoo is getting a massive nerf in this patch, with him now having to fully charge the Typhoon to get the knockup. This means he can't just instantly throw out a giant AoE knockup on command in a fight, and also can't instantly knock someone up during his 100 to 0 combo. He now actually has to wait to get that effect, which is a massive nerf. Thanatos is getting a fix to his ultimate where it will now apply item effects when it wasn't previously, which is nice. Next up, we have Morrigan's aspect, which is getting a nerf with her 3's cooldown going from 15 seconds flat to 17 scaling down to 15, which is pretty important as this is generally the ability you rank last. The movement speed buff is going down to a flat 30%, whereas before it was 30 scaling up to 40, and the duration of the movement speed and refire window is going from 5 down to 3 seconds. It's now just 3 seconds flat, which is the biggest one here. Having less time to mess with people before she has to TP away or lose that ability is going to be big. And finally, for God balance, we have a Ymir shift that aims to buff tank Ymir and nerf damage Ymir. They said he's been generally underperforming, but actually damage Ymir is doing better than tank Ymir for the most part. For the 2, they are increasing the base damage but decreasing the strength scaling. The 3 is getting a reduced stun duration but now gets an extra 0.2 seconds per 100 item protection, stacking up to twice. So if you have 200 item protections in your build, which isn't too hard for for a full tank support, this will stun for longer than before. With 100 item protections, it's the same, and with less than that, it's a nerf. They also decreased the mana cost a little bit on this ability, and the ultimate's damage scaling from protections has been increased from 30% to 45%. Moving on to item balance for this update though, which is fairly small but has some significant changes, such as the first one, which is a blink buff from 180 seconds to 140 on its cooldown. Keep in mind the 30-second refund if you hit a god after blinking is still active, so this is effectively 110 seconds for aggressive purposes now. Aegis is also getting a pretty big bug fix that's also a buff. The movement speed that this was supposed to grant after the immunity was done is just not working at all, so this will now work. The Reaper is getting some buffs as it's been underperforming since its rework recently. The stack duration is going up from 5 seconds to 6, the starting stack count is going up from 3 to 4, and it will now immediately max out your current stacks when you kill a god. Glad Shield is getting a small buff to its base stats with 5 more physical pro and 25 more health. And finally for items, Helm of Radiance is getting a shift with a 200 gold cost increase, a 10 intelligence increase, and they have given it 10 more base physical protection but decreased the max stack count from 6 to 4. At max stacks this means 4 less protections in total, but it's easier to get to max stacks and the item will be more effective at lower stack counts than it was before. They also showed off the Essentials item store that they mentioned on the show last week. The idea of this is as a transition for new players coming out of quick play and that very simplified build system into the normal game. Rather than dumping them straight into the full item store with no help whatsoever, they will now do a similar thing to quick play in terms of being presented with 3 build options and then picking from 3 items each time until they have a full build. But in the Essentials store, they will actually build the items from components like you normally would, and will have consumables available as well, including 3k pots. It's basically a middle ground between the normal item building and the quick play system to ease new players into regular queues. But moving into the Q&A section for today's show, first up was a question on Rod of Tahuti and if they have any plans for it, as it's a very essential and centralizing item, and Pon said it's absolutely something they have discussed and something he'd like to change, but it would have substantial ripple effects throughout the rest of mage and mid lane builds and even other builds, so it would have to be something they put a good bit of thought and time into. If they just remove Tahuti and buff every int item in the game by 25%, for example, that would mean late game mages feel basically the same, but early and mid game they would just have 25% more int than they did before, which is a massive buff. It could also affect some builds where 1 or 2 int items are sprinkled in, as those would just get stronger as a kind of like side effect, stuff like that. So something they are thinking about, but it would be more involved than just removing Rod of Tahuti and buffing every int item by 25% and calling it a day. Someone asked when they'll release an aspect for an older god, as they've mostly been doing aspects for the new releases at the moment, and Kilgun said they are cooking one up that's currently slated for OB18 and it's shaping up to be pretty spicy. And finally, someone asked when they will add more new items, and Pon said there will be one in the next patch, so obviously not this one, but for OB19. They're also looking at potential changes to underperforming items that people don't really jive with and making them more interesting or better, as well as filling some niches that aren't filled very well at the moment. Intelligence attack speed was specifically mentioned. But that's everything discussed on today's Titan Talk. Don't forget to drop a like before you leave, and I'll catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.